welcome to the What Would You Make challenge. For this video, we're going to explore some fall and Christmas crafts. I hope you enjoy! Last week, I went to a thrift store and I found this wooden tray and it needed some love. So I'm taking out my zip sander and I'm using the different types of sandpaper on the zip sander. So you usually get like a really tough gritty sandpaper, and then there's the brown sandpaper there that I'm using next, and that one is a little bit smoother. And then there's actually like a light gray type sandpaper that I used at the very end to just finish sanding everything off. So to stain this tray, I'm going to use my Waverly chalk paint in antique wax, and this just helps keep the odor down and it dries really quickly. And once I get a nice layer of the antique wax all over this tray, I'm going to take a baby wipe and wipe everything down and then let this dry completely. Once everything is dry, I'm going to take my Waverly chalk paint in the color white, and we're just going to dry brush all around this tray. Now don't completely coat the whole entire tray. You still want to see that wood stain come through, but you want to do a nice even coat around the whole entire tray, top, bottom, and back. Once that's dry, we're going to grab our Waverly chalk paint in the color Elephant, and we're going to do the exact same thing. And so this just gives this tray a lot of dimension because you're going to see all three colors. Once everything is completely dry, I'm going to take my finishing wax, and I use Jolene's finishing wax, and I'll put a link in my description box below. And we're just going to take a lint-free cloth and wipe down this tray with that sealer. And this takes 24 hours for it to completely set in, but it looks beautiful once it's done. And for this fall, I'm going to fill this tray with some beautiful fabric pumpkins. And if you've never made these before, I'll put a link to a video that will show you how to make these. Wow, this tray transforms to Christmas beautifully. And this month, I'm participating in the What Would You Make challenge. And the hosts this month, Connie, Up All Night DIY, and Rustic and Lace DIYs, all did a beautiful job with this playlist. Please check out these lovely ladies in the description box below and check out the playlist. So this craft starts out with a cute nautical sign that I had in my stash. And I'm going to start by removing the nautical piece on the front of this sign. And I'm sanding that down with my zip sander, and so we have a nice surface to start with. Next, I'm going to go ahead and flip this over and remove the beads. And we're going to set these aside, and we're going to reattach them here in a little bit. So try to just keep them on that little string. I'm just setting them in a little basket and moving it aside. Now I'm going to zip sand this back side just to make sure everything is nice and smooth. I'm going to move this sign onto a paintable surface. And using our Waverly antique wax, we're going to go ahead and stain the front side of this sign. And if you've never done this before, you paint a nice coat of Waverly wax on the front, and then you go ahead and wipe it down with a baby wipe. Now let's grab our Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster and do a dry brush of paint over the top of this sign. Now let's set that aside to dry. This next step, we're going to use some wood biscuits. I got mine on Amazon, but you can get them at Lowe's or even Home Depot or any other hardware store. So I started trying to paint these with some Waverly chalk paint in yellow, but they were moving around a lot. So I used some painter's tape, and on the back side of the painter's tape, I laid that down on a piece of cardboard and just taped down these little petals. And we're going to go ahead and get these all painted with our Waverly chalk paint here. And don't worry about the back side, we're not going to be seeing those, so just get around the edges while you paint the top. Now go ahead and set those aside to dry, and while that's drying, I'm going to take a wood slice, and I got a package of these on Amazon, and they were a variety of sizes. And I'm just going to paint this wood slice with some apple barrel paint in burnt umber. And I taped that down to the piece of cardboard as well, just to make it a little bit easier so we wouldn't have anything sliding around. Next, I'm going to take that same burnt umber paint and I'm just going to dry brush around the outsides of these petals to give them some dimensions. And now's the fun part. We're going to put the fall side of this cute little display together first. And we're going to start by just setting around the petals of the sunflower around that center piece. And make sure that everything is positioned good before we start gluing anything down. Next, we're going to take some wood glue and some hot glue and glue our petals and our center of our flower down to this cute sign. Drop a sunflower down below if you guys are enjoying the video. And once all of the glue is set, we're going to flip this sign over and start on the back side. So I'm going to grab my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster. We're going to do 2 coats of paint on this back side of this sign. So I'm going to grab my heat tool and assist in helping this paint dry. And once everything is dried, we're going to grab the bead hanger that we had on earlier and reattach it to the back side using our staple gun. And if you don't have a staple gun, you could just tape the beads off before you painted the front and the back side of the sign and do it that way. Next, I'm going to grab some of my Mod Podge and we're just going to go ahead and paint a nice coat of Mod Podge on the back side of this sign. And once our Mod Podge is completely dry, I'm going to grab a napkin, and this napkin I did get on Amazon, and I'll put a link in my description box below, but I'm going to remove the back layer of the napkin, and we're going to cut out the word cheers. For our next step, we're going to take that piece of napkin, and we're going to place that right on top of the back side of this sign. And this fits really well on this sign. And now I'm going to grab a piece of parchment paper and I'm going to lay that over the top of our napkin. And using a hot iron, we're going to iron this napkin right onto the Mod Podge. And this Mod Podge will heat up and the napkin will adhere to this board. Next, I grab my handy dandy cute little zip sander and we're just going to zip sand this down in a downward motion. And if you don't have a zip sander, a sanding block will work fine. And just sand off any of the extra napkin. I'm going to put the sign back on a paintable surface and I'm going to take some Mod Podge and just seal the whole entire sign up. Once that sign is dried completely, you could stop right here, but I wanted to add a little bit more to the sign. So I'm taking some of my Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster and I'm using a circle brush here and I'm just dry brushing like snow all around the outside edge of this sign. Now our sign is complete. This is a perfect little door hanger or little sign that you can put on a tray that can be used for both fall and for Christmas. For this craft, we're going to start with one of these falling leaves rolling pens. And I'm going to start by just removing the little bow and the sticker from the back side of this rolling pen. And I use my heat tool to help get some of that sticky tape off that back side. Next, I'll grab my zip sander and just sand off any leftover residue. And this step is optional. I did tape everything off for this video, but realized after I made the project that, hey, I probably didn't need to tape it all off and that could be an unnecessary step. But depending on the colors you use, you may want to do that. Next, I'm going to go ahead and sand the word falling leaves off of the front side of this rolling pen. And I did that because I didn't want to just paint over it and have the letters still show through. It's completely up to you. You could just paint over it, but know that the letters are slightly raised and you may still kind of see them through if you don't do the sanding. Once I've finished sanding this down, I did paint that with the color plaster of Waverly chalk paint. And after that dries, we're going to add a layer of Mod Podge to the back side of this. And then we're going to take our heat tool and make sure everything's dried completely. Now, I got this napkin last year at Dollar Tree. I'm not sure if they have them this Christmas or not because I haven't seen them out yet. But they tend to have some fun Christmas napkins during the holiday season. You can also find a lot of fun napkins on Amazon or when you're just out shopping at any of your stores that you go to. There's usually a lot of fun holiday napkins. And so now I'm just going to layer this right on top of our rolling pin, and I'm using a piece of parchment paper and a hot iron to have this adhere to the top. I'm going to grab my zip sander and I'm just going to sand down in a downward motion the remainder piece of the napkin right off of this rolling pin. Now I'm going to grab some more Mod Podge and we're just going to use that and paint that over the top of the napkin to seal everything in. Now you could completely just stop right there and move on to the fall side of this rolling pin, but I did want to add something else Christmassy on the back side here. So I found these fun letters, and they're rub-on transfer letters at the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to cut out the letters to spell Merry. What I found using these rub-on transfers is that they stick really well, so you don't want to move them around much once you've got them placed onto your board. So just be really careful with that because they will stick really quickly. And if you want to try to move them, it may not be possible. So make sure you have that the way you would like. And then once you've done that, I'm using just a popsicle stick to rub those back onto the little rolling pin. And then I decided to add a little bit of Rub and Buff, and I just used a tiny little squeeze of the Rub and Buff and a little lint-free towel, and I just wiped around the edges of the rolling pin to give it a little bit more gold sparkle. Next, I added a cute little snowflake that I got at the Dollar Tree and just glued that right on. So let's move on to the fall side of this rolling pin. For this side, we're going to use some Waverly chalk paint in the color Elephant. We're just going to paint that whole side of the rolling pin. Once the paint has dried, I grabbed this fun stencil, and I got this stencil in a 6-pack on Amazon, and I'll put the link in my store below, but I'm just going to put that right on top of the rolling pin. And I'm going to use some chalk paste, and this is in Vintage Lace, and we're going to just squeegee that over the top of the stencil. And now let's reveal the sign. I didn't show this on camera, but I did use some Jolene's sealing wax over the top of the Hello Pumpkin just to help seal everything in. Next, we're just going to add a gingham bow on either side of these rolling pins. And so I like to put the bow on the opposite side of the rolling pin, if that makes any sense, so that the bows are like, kind of looks like they're stacked on top of each other, and it doesn't look funny on either side of the rolling pin. I just want to say a quick thank you to every one of you. I really appreciate all of your support. Please remember, craft more, stress less.